Hey, everybody. Welcome. Glad to be with you all here tonight. So, tonight we have a very special guest, a very good writer. Many people have known his writings. If you've been doing socialist and communist stuff in America within the last, 5, 10 years, you must have come across him at some point. This is the great Rainer Shea of Humboldt, California. Welcome, Rainer.
Hello.
Right. He's newswiththeory.com. Right? That's your website, newswiththeory.com. I'm also proud to say he is a member of the Center for Political Innovation, spoke at our convention in Oregon last December. It was really, really great to have him there. And he's been writing many important articles about many important topics. He's following the Uhuru case very closely. He's one of the few people who understands the magnitude of the prosecution of the Uhuru 3 and the trial that opens up very soon next week. But he's also been following the Korean Peninsula, which is an issue in CPI we've been following very, very closely. So he just wrote an article about that. So Rainer, do you want to go ahead and kind of give us the gist of what you wrote in your article?
Well, I think that this issue that I talk about, where South Korea, its present government has been breaking from the maximally aggressive foreign policy of the United States, how it's been refusing to go as hard against the DPRK as Washington wants it to. It has to do with something that you've been talking about recently, where in certain instances, the puppets of imperialism break from what the imperialists want simply because they are so self-driven, because they're so self-interested. And that happened with a lot of the right-wing military dictatorships during the 20th century. The United States decided that those dictatorships were no longer the best allies, so the United States helped get rid of them, replace them with something more liberal. And the equivalent is happening in South Korea, where South Korea's president has not been willing to fully go along with what Washington wants. So the US has started to apply pressure. But that's not what you publicly see. The official stance of the Biden administration is that South Korea is as much of an ally as ever. We love them. Kamala Harris has been shaking hands with their president. But behind the scenes, some more complicated stuff has been happening. And, this doesn't mean that South Korea's government is a friend of communists. Rather, it means that South Korea has been starting to fight with our main enemy, the United States. And when our different enemies are fighting, then that's pretty much always a good thing for us. And what I think this could lead to in the long term is an acceleration of the process wherein South Korean capitalism collapses. In South Korea, it may be a great industrial power, but that power, that growth that it's attained, it's come with a cost. That cost is going quite deep into the process of collapse, which comes with the irrationality of the market. And South Korea is experiencing economic shockwaves right now, the kinds of shockwaves that anybody who knows about the dynamics of capitalism, that's what's going to happen. And even in instances like South Korea, which appear so strong on the surface, those systems are going to collapse at some point.
Well, let's give a little bit of context because a lot has been happening on the Korean Peninsula that hasn't gotten a huge amount of attention in American media. So Putin went to North Korea, right? Putin went to North Korea, and North Korea and Russia are already allies. They're already good friends. But Putin went to North Korea and he visited an official state visit. Kim Jong-un took him around. And they signed a strategic agreement. And right after that, Putin went to China and he went to Vietnam, and they signed this agreement. So North Korea is totally friendly to Russia, selling Russia weapons, cooperating with Russia militarily. And after that, the United States just lost it against North Korea, right? The USA already doesn't like North Korea. The Biden administration has bashed Donald Trump for daring to go there and try to make peace. We'll get to that in a minute. And so there was an escalation. There was some fire, some missiles went back and forth, and there was an escalation. And then this happened. And this is South Korean television, mind you. And this is what happened. And I saw this, and my jaw dropped when I saw this. I'm like, this shows that there's trouble in paradise.
U.S. federal prosecutors have charged a former CIA analyst, Sumi Terry, a pro-Korea scholar who's also an expert on North Korea, of working for the South Korean government in exchange for gifts. It's seen as an unexpected event by pundits. Kim Jong-sil explains.
Federal prosecutors in New York have charged Sumi Terry for failing to register under the U.S. Federal Foreign Agents Registration Act and for conspiring to violate it. The U.S. government requires individuals acting as agents for foreign principals to register and publicly disclose their relationships and activities so that it can evaluate them. The New York prosecutors say Ms. Terry did not register despite engaging in extensive activities for and at the direction of the South Korean government. According to the indictment released on Tuesday, she began operating as a foreign agent in June 2013 when she was first contacted by an intelligence officer posing as a diplomat for the South Korean mission to the UN. It said she accepted designer handbags and expensive meals in exchange for information and lobbying over the next 10 years. The indictment said she also received at least $37,000 in covert payments. Ms. Terry's lawyer released a statement saying that the allegations were unfounded and distorted the work of a scholar and news analyst known for her independence and years of service to the United States. Born in 1972, Ms. Terry moved to the U.S. when she was 12 years old. After getting her PhD in international relations, she worked at the CIA as well as the U.S. National Security Council. Pundits say the indictment comes as a surprise, as for the past decade she was just working as a scholar in the academic field. Analysts also say the indictment could potentially shrivel the development and research of pro-Korea scholars in the U.S. who are significantly lacking in influence and impact compared to pro-Japan scholars. The South Korean National Intelligence Service released a brief comment on Wednesday saying it's closely communicating with the U.S. intelligence agencies, referring to the indictment. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
So that's a news story from South Korea. Right? Sumi Terry served in the administration of Barack Obama, served in the administration of George W. Bush, is a CIA agent, basically, was a CIA, card-carrying CIA operative for years, hates North Korea, makes disgusting anti-North Korean propaganda films that are nominated for Emmys. She is, by all means, she is an anti-communist. She is pro-U.S. imperialism. But she is born on the Korean Peninsula, and they allege that she was really close friends with this diplomat who worked at the UN mission of South Korea, who was secretly an intelligence officer. And God forbid he bought her some handbags and he took her to get her nails done. So she's been arrested, and she's arrested under the same charge that they got the Uhuru movement allegedly on, right? That the trial starts in the Uhuru movement case. Right? Being a foreign agent, right? And so she could go to prison for 15 years. She's been expelled from the Council on Foreign Relations, which is like the most powerful think tank in Washington, D.C. of American foreign policy. This is what in the world is going on here. The top, South Korea linked anti-North Korea scholar and advisor to American intelligence gets nabbed, gets arrested by the FBI, and is charged with being a foreign agent. Now, as this is happening, you'll notice that the situation on the Korean Peninsula is calming down. And the president of South Korea just came out and offered a peace deal to North Korea. Now, that shows you right there, there's trouble in paradise, right? If they arrest South Korea's best friend in Washington, then as Washington is trying to escalate against North Korea, South Korea offers a peace deal. Something is going on here. And if we just sit back and go, oh, they're all bad, they're all against North Korea, we're going to miss the boat. Something big is going on here. What do you think, Rainer?
In that thing that I wrote, I pointed to a quote from another member of the Council on Foreign Relations, or I don't know if he was a member. He was certainly featured on there. This guy, I think, I don't quite remember his name, but he said that one of the things that could destroy the U.S.-South Korea alliance is the prevalence of nationalistic sentiments in both South Korea and the United States. And clearly he was referring both to South Korea's current president and to Donald Trump. I mean, we all know that when these empire managers talk about nationalism threatening U.S. alliances, they're talking about Trump. And this is another part of this whole nuance that you're trying to point out. It's that Donald Trump, he's absolutely anti-communist. We can't really call him anti-war. We can't call him anti-imperialist. But if he wins, he's going to reopen diplomacy with North Korea. And we know this because he did that. He actually did that as president.
Indeed. And I want to show the clip. If I could just find the time stamp. So there's clearly a really big division in the ruling class over North Korea, right? So just a quick blow-by-blow of events. Donald Trump went to North Korea. First president of the United States, sitting president, to ever go to North Korea. You know, Bill Clinton went there when he was not president. I think Jimmy Carter went there. But first sitting American president to ever visit North Korea. It was I think the second of three meetings that were planned. First, there was the meeting that took place in Vietnam or in Singapore. And then there was the meeting in Vietnam. And then there was the third meeting was a surprise meeting in North Korea. Donald Trump went to North Korea, and it looked like the peace process was moving along. However, going along with him, the two advisors of Donald Trump who helped him do it throughout the process are Mike Pompeo and John Bolton. Now, John Bolton eventually quits the Trump administration, but everybody knows John Bolton is the guy who sabotaged the North Korea talks. Because while the North Korea talks were happening, John Bolton, he said that Libyan options are on the table. Well, we all know what happened to Gaddafi, right? And, you know, they said, well, Libyan options are on the table when it comes to Kim Jong-un. He's basically threatening the life of Kim Jong-un at the moment that they're trying to get him to negotiate, right? Not a good diplomatic strategy, right? Meanwhile, while the peace process is happening, and this got no attention in the United States, but Spain has a North Korean embassy. And a number of American-linked people went into the North Korean embassy in Spain and trashed the place and stole a bunch of their computers while Trump was trying to negotiate with North Korea. And that got a whole lot of attention in the Spanish media. There was investigation and all of that. So, you know, John Bolton is openly trying to sabotage it. Some people linked to the United States and linked to the CIA go in and trash the North Korean embassy, attack the embassy. Then, you know, but Mike Pompeo, we're told, is the guy who supposedly was for it. Well, later, you know, Donald Trump leaves office. Mike Pompeo also turns against Donald Trump. So John Bolton quit the Trump administration, and he said he quit the Trump administration. He had a big fight with Trump because Trump didn't want to keep going on Venezuela. Trump was just like, I'm tired of dealing with Venezuela. And so John Bolton was angry. He quit. And then he said that if Donald Trump ever gets reelected, that the USA will leave the NATO alliance. He basically denounces Trump and campaigns against him in the 2020 election. He's for Biden, right? Mike Pompeo stays with Trump, but after Trump loses, he denounces Trump and he supports the FBI raid on Mar-a-Lago. Right. And he says, well, Donald Trump was mishandling classified information. And I used to be at the CIA, and CIA documents are so important. We got to keep our people protected. And he basically supports Donald Trump getting prosecuted. So the two guys who were with Donald Trump while he was negotiating the Korea thing are no longer with him. Meanwhile, the Wall Street Journal, Donald Trump continues to brag about meeting with North Korea. I was at the Libertarian Party convention that happened a few months ago, and Donald Trump was up in front of the crowd and he said, I met with Kim Jong-un, I met with North Korea. He brags about it. A couple weeks ago, the Wall Street Journal, which is Republican aligned, which is backing Trump in the election, attacked Donald Trump for bragging about it and said that, Donald Trump brags about meeting with North Korea and all that, but it didn't go anyplace. It didn't do any good. So meanwhile, Kamala Harris attacked Donald Trump in her convention speech for wanting to meet with North Korea and attacked him over it. But Donald Trump continues to brag about it in his speeches. Something is going on here, Rainer. There is a big division in the ruling class over this question. And I think it's very, very exciting. It's pretty clear that Donald Trump thinks what he did on the Korean Peninsula was badass. It was amazing. It was awesome. And the bulk of the American intelligence apparatus and the ruling class says, no, it wasn't. We don't ever want to do that again. But it looks like South Korea wants it to continue. And South Korea, that's Hyundai, that's Samsung. They've got a lot of financial interest, and it looks like they want to continue the peace process. And I think part of that is that South Korea doesn't just do business with America. They also do business with China, and China obviously wants peace with North Korea and with Russia. And when I was at the World Youth Festival, there were North Korean and South Korean youth at the World Youth Festival, and Russia has a pretty decent relationship with South Korea. There was a whole big thing in media recently about, there was Iranian money is in South Korean banks. South Korea allows Iranian money to bank there. They don't, and so some of their money that was frozen was unfrozen and given back to them by the Biden administration. South Korea is becoming more and more independent. And so, as the United States is escalating with North Korea, furious that Putin went there, they arrest Sumi Terry, and then the president of South Korea, President Yoon, makes an amazing peace offer to North Korea, offering to give them all kinds of aid and all of that. This is very, very big, and people don't seem to notice what's going on here. There is a big division in the ruling class. South Korea is moving in the opposite direction. Donald Trump is moving in the opposite direction. But the bulk of the American ruling class wants to keep the fighting on the Korean Peninsula going. Why is this important, Rainer?
Well, it's because the ruling class, or the dominant wing of the ruling class, monopoly finance capitalists, they want to expand the wars that are happening right now in Eastern Europe and West Asia into East Asia. They view East Asia as the next front in which they should expand this conflict that they've been instigating. And they think that if they do this, then they'll have a better chance of subduing China and preserving U.S. hegemony. Realistically, they can't win against China. They already lost against Korea like 70 or so years ago. So what makes them think that they can win these wars again? But, the imperialism, it's imperialism is fighting an absurd battle, a battle against the progression of history. And so they're going to keep pursuing these wars no matter what. So that's the reality, that monopoly finance capital, the thing in which imperialism comes from, it's doing all it can to ensure that escalations keep happening on the Korean Peninsula. But everybody else, even the elements of capital that are a bit lower than them, they're pushing back. And just less than 10 years ago, in 2017, even Trump was repeating this inflammatory rhetoric, saying, we will bring fire and fury to North Korea like the world has never seen. Then within a year after then, he was doing something unprecedented, in that he was the first U.S. president to set foot in North Korea.
Yeah, well, there's a couple different layers to this, right? But I think the first thing I want to point out is that when we see a division in the ruling class like this in relation to a socialist, anti-imperialist country, and that there's some people in the ruling class that want to get along with it better, right? And there's a key U.S. ally that wants to get along with it better, that is fighting. I mean, this creates an opening for those of us who are anti-imperialists to actually do something, to actually try and change the world. Right? I think Marx said philosophers have sought to only analyze the world. The point, however, is to change it, right? And we want to make a difference, right? Anything we can do to weaken imperialism, to help the people of North Korea that have been subjected to a blockade and sanctions and had millions of their people die in the Korean War, and a lot of people starving to death during the arduous march after the fall of the Soviet Union. I mean, the North Koreans have been through hell, and still they stand with the Palestinians. They're standing with Russia right now. They were supporters of the Black Panthers when the Black Panthers were under threat. So, So this is an opening for those of us who actually want to change the world. We see a division in the ruling class, and we can intervene. And I think that that's a really, really important thing to remember. Now, the way I'm going to talk more about various ways that we have tried to intervene as the Center for Political Innovation. But one of them I've got video of. 2023, we went to the White House and we had a rally for peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula in front of the White House. How did this stop? This was a great moment. June 30th, 2019. The leader of People's Korea and the leader of the United States shook hands. They met, the first president ever to visit the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. We had Donald Trump trying to make peace with a country that is still technically at war with the United States. Donald Trump was trying to open the door to peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. There would be hope to bring the troops home from South Korea. There would be hope that there could be denuclearization, that North Korea wouldn't feel threatened anymore, that there could be no more bombs and weapons, and the people of Korea could reunify. And Donald Trump going to People's Korea was sabotaged. It was sabotaged by John Bolton and the neocons, the same forces that got us into Ukraine, the same forces that are escalating and pushing buttons against China and Taiwan on the Taiwan Strait, the same forces that want World War III sabotaged the peace process on the Korean Peninsula. We're here to say, finish what Trump started. We want peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. We want U.S. leaders and the leaders of People's Korea to sit down. We would like to see trade between the United States and People's Korea. We would like to see those railroads in South Korea that have been built. We'd like to see them in action and see the Korean people trading with each other. We don't want war. We don't want money wasted on international confrontations. And we also don't want a police state. And at the same time that the big bankers who control Joe Biden, the Silicon Valley monopolists and fascists, the same forces that control Joe Biden, are waging a war not just around the world, but against the American people. They are driving our country into poverty. Our trains are derailing. People are breathing in deadly chemicals. The water is not properly purified. Jobs are falling apart. Schools are falling apart. It's a nightmare. They have waged a war against us. And instead of rebuilding America, they're trying to move toward a low-wage police state. That's what they're doing here in the United States. They're trying to move toward a low-wage police state. We saw what happened, what's been revealed about January 6th. That was a setup. We saw that those people were led to do what they did for propaganda purposes. We call for an amnesty. We don't endorse what the people did, but they were enabled to do it and set up to do it by the American government. The FBI, the Secret Service, other agencies enabled what happened on January 6th to happen. Those folks were entrapped. And we say that until they're going to be honest with the public about what really happened on January 6th, there needs to be an amnesty for those who've been arrested. And the same goes for the Uhuru movement. A group of black revolutionaries, black activists, had guns pointed in their faces, drones flown into their homes. They were terrorized and accused of being Russian agents. Why? Because they were organizing for the rights of black people, organizing for the rights in their community, providing services that were not available in their community. They're waging a war against us. At the same time, they're waging a war against China, Russia, Iran, Venezuela, Cuba, and any country that dares break out of their financial system. And it is our responsibility to oppose it and to join arm in arm with the people of the world against imperialism. Yeah, that was us. We were in front of the White House with our American flags and our banners. Yeah, what's up? What's up? Rainer? Seems Rainer has frozen for a minute there. Maybe he'll come back here in a second. Yeah, he seems to have frozen. He says no sound. That's interesting. Plenty of sound on my end. Can you hear me now, Rainer? Can you hear me? Okay. Maybe come back in again. I'll remove you and you can come back in again. Okay. All right. Okay. Come back into the studio again, Rainer. That's bizarre. I don't know why he doesn't have any sound. That's strange. But hey, Rainer is our guest. We are honored to have him here. His website is newswiththeory.com. And, for some reason, his audio seems to have cut out, which is very strange. But we're happy to have him. All right. All right. Let's see if it works this time. Can you hear me now, Rainer?
Yes.
All right. Very good. Very, very good. So what do you make of this whole situation and the division in the ruling class?
Well, I think that there is a good chance, like you said, that Trump is going to win because, see, last time you said that the last time that he won, it was because many figures within the military, within the parts of the government that aren't necessarily connected to the deep state, even some parts of the deep state, they didn't like the neocon drive towards unlimited escalations, towards unlimited war. So they decided to let him in. But I'll see if that's, I'll see how true that is. I'll see how well that theory gets tested in 2024. Because I feel like the reason why Trump won in 2016 is because his scandal tape made the election managers feel too comfortable, and they miscalculated because the ruling class genuinely seemed shocked that he won in 2016. So that's the thing that
you're talking about the grab her by the bleep tape, right?
Yeah. I think that unintentional. I think that accidentally set off a explosion within American politics and an escalation in the divisions of the ruling class. We're still seeing the ramifications. And I think that our ruling class really cares about preventing Trump from winning, or the bulk been talking about. Can you still hear me?
I can still hear you. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, the bulk of the ruling class really cares about escalating in East Asia. And so it really wants Kamala Harris to win. But this is also about Taiwan, the other big war front in East Asia. And when it comes to Taiwan, it's going to be a lot harder to prevent war, regardless of which candidate wins this election, because both Trump and Harris are incredibly anti-China. And I think that we need to be able to find the optimistic aspects of any given situation, not fall into pessimism. So I think that what we need to do is take the progress that we've already seen happen when it comes to Korea, like the ideological progress, where the bulk of the MAGA base has been brought onto the idea of peace with Korea. So I think that we should reach out to the MAGA base and turn them towards the idea of peace with China.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot we could say there. But I think what I really would urge people watching to do right now is understand there is nuance to all of this, right? Now, Donald Trump is super pro-Israel in everything that he says. He says Israel can do no wrong. He says he blames Iran. He's just repeating all of their lines. And we know that. And we're not endorsing Donald Trump. And when he was president, he murdered Qasem Soleimani, which was awful, and escalated toward war with Iran. He was not good to Venezuela. But there's nuance in all of this. And that there are clearly divisions. And that Donald Trump is appealing to people's anti-war sentiments right now. He's presenting himself as the anti-war guy. And Kamala Harris, if you listened to her campaign speech, it sounded like she was calling him a hippie, saying, oh, he wants to get along with tyrants and dictators, and he's denigrating our country and saying everything's so bad and denigrating our country. This is the way they used to talk about anti-war people during the Bush years, right? We're un-American, we're bad, disrespecting the country, and we love tyrants like Saddam Hussein, we love dictators and communists, right? I mean, it's like if you listen to Kamala Harris's speech, Donald Trump is clearly running as the anti-establishment candidate. People that don't like the march toward World War III and don't like the fact that that our freedoms are being taken away and that the economy is falling apart and feel that the government works for somebody other than them. they're going to vote for Donald Trump. And Donald Trump is probably going to get a much larger percentage of the black vote this time than he did last time, right? And that doesn't mean that Donald Trump is legitimately anti-establishment, and that doesn't mean Donald Trump won't do awful things as president. But we have to understand that like left and right have become oddly reversed. The Democratic Party is the voice of the politically correct establishment and the intelligence agencies that carry out regime change operations around the world in the name of human rights and LGBT and whatever. And the Republicans are appealing to people that feel alienated from the American structure that is having this woke makeover right now. It's complicated. And that it's not simple enough. And that, one thing I see a lot, because I talk to a lot of people who are RFK supporters, who are Jill Stein supporters, who are voting for different third-party candidates. And I hear people looking for the perfect third-party candidate. Have you dealt with people like that? They're looking for the perfect third-party candidate. And I say to them, well, what if you found this perfect third-party candidate who was right on every issue? They're still not going to win, and that people don't understand that it's about bigger issues. It's about the balance of forces. It's about the divisions in the ruling class. It's about factions, and it's not simply about finding the perfect candidate and casting your ballot for them. I got a lot to say about this issue. There's many angles we can come at it with, but I want to start with that I think you and Rainer, you and I can agree that Sumi Terry is not on our side, but she's been prosecuted because of this. The South Korean government is not on our side, but they've been prosecuted. And this, Donald Trump is not on our side. But look what's going on. It's complicated. Do we agree on that?
Absolutely. And, I looked closer at the contents of South Korea's reunification proposal. And at first I was a little bit disappointed, but then I looked a bit deeper into it still. And I found out about the ways in which South Korean capitalism has been collapsing, the weaknesses within that system, all the ways that the people there are being made to suffer because they're trapped in extremely dystopian cyberpunk machine. And something has to give. The South Korean demographics are collapsing. There's such an imbalance of old versus young people. In 50 years, there's simply not going to be an adequate labor force. So at a certain point, the two Koreas, really, they're one Korea, they're going to need to reunite in order for the South to be saved from this capitalist crisis. Either South Korea is going to keep declining, it's going to become more and more of a dystopian landscape where an increasingly old population gets sacrificed by the cruelties of capitalism, while the United States builds up a military presence there. Either that's going to happen, or it's going to be a reunification wherein the socialist system of the North gets expanded to the entire peninsula. And the South Korean president's proposal, it was essentially, from what I understand, an aggressive anti-communist statement where he was vowing to assimilate the North into South Korea's capitalist system, and that's not good.
That's not what I heard. What I heard was he said that if North Korea takes one step toward nuclear denuclearization, that doesn't mean they have to give up their nukes. They just have to start, demobilizing their nukes. He will give them, he gave a very large amount of money, food aid, gas and all that. He listed if you take one step toward this, we will give you this huge amount of stuff. That's the initial offer that I heard. And that, I think he did say that, in the long term, they want North Korea to just become part of the South Korean capitalist society. But in the short term, he made a material offer. And what was different about that offer is right now, the American government's position is that until North Korea completely denuclearizes, no talks, which is that's not negotiate. You can't negotiate. That's not how negotiations work. Oh, just give us everything we want and then we negotiate. Well, then you already got what you want. There's no point in negotiating, right? And he said, well, no, if they take one single step toward denuclearization, he will give them all of this aid. That's what he said. That's the offer that was made, from my understanding. Does that not match what you heard, or?
Well, all I heard were the worst parts, and I think that's because there's a lot of informational manipulation around this. I've been struggling to figure out exactly how to interpret this, because there's lots of news sites that the imperialists have created that present themselves as supposedly neutral on North Korea, but really they're just informational manipulation tools. And I'm aware of that, but it was so hard to parse out exactly how to interpret it. And I'm glad that I was just able to get that extra context. But apparently, it is still true from what you just described that it's that this statement that the South Korean president made was about appealing to his right-wing base, showing how good he is at combating communism.
Yeah.
But you know, in the long term, as these divisions within the U.S. ruling class intensify, as the divisions between South Korea and the United States intensify, and as history continues to progress forward with the rise of Russia, which South Korea that is already quite close to, it's going to get closer towards that great scenario where socialism comes to the entirety of the peninsula.
Yeah, well, there's many layers to this. So I don't know. We're streaming on YouTube right now, so I hope that they don't try to censor us or shut us down. But last year, before everything that just happened in the recent months on the Korean Peninsula happened, there was drama on YouTube about North Korea and U.S.-North Korea relations, and I described what went on in a speech that I gave when I was out in Los Angeles a couple months ago. So and I'll tell you the context of that speech later, because that's also very important. There's many layers to all of this, as you said, but I'm first going to just show this clip when I talked about how YouTube is related to drama on the Korean Peninsula in my speech a couple months ago.
Saw that there was a 10 or 11-year-old girl in North Korea. She went by Yumi, and she started a YouTube channel. And this YouTube channel, I learned about it from CNN, because CNN ran an article about how scandalous it was. North Korean propaganda YouTube channel started by a 10-year-old girl. And they ran this scandalous piece about it. Well, I watched the channel. One of the videos is about her favorite popsicles, the popsicles she likes to eat. There's another video of her going fishing with her grandpa. There's another video of her going to the water park that she and her friends all like to go to. And CNN was like outraged. How dare YouTube allow this channel to exist? And they eventually took her YouTube channel down. And they took the YouTube channel down, and the reason that they gave for taking it down is they said that her YouTube channel had a, quote, positive bias toward North Korea. And I'm looking at this, I'm like, what was she supposed to do? Make a YouTube video about my country sucks? You know, I mean, it's like, this is ridiculous. And then some people say to me, well, Caleb, they're trying to say that North Korea is a paradise. They're trying to say North Korea is a paradise. That's propaganda. No, they're not trying to say North Korea is a paradise. What she's saying is that if there's a war, we're people too. That's what they're saying. And she's saying it's not just a 24/7 military parade like we see in American television. Every time they show North Korea on TV, what do you see? I say countdown. I say North Korea, and then two to 3 seconds later, you see a bunch of guys marching around like this, right? We think North Korea is just a 24/7 military parade. But there's real fathers there, there's real daughters there, there's real mothers, there's brothers, there's sisters, there's children, there's families. And if there's a war, real people are going to die. And that's what her YouTube channel was trying to say, and we need messages like that on YouTube.
Yeah, so what do you make of that? How YouTube, for a while, they were allowing North Korean YouTube channels, and then they just took them all down after CNN ran this scandalous hit piece about 10-year-old Yumi's YouTube channel.
Oh yeah, this is a kind of propaganda tactic that I've been dealing with for a long time, and it got me when I was a teenager, but at a certain point I had to give up that perception of North Korea, or rather its proper name, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, DPRK. North Korea isn't even necessarily the proper name that perpetuates the idea that they should be separate. But I have had to deal with a lot of these kinds of intense anti-communist beliefs about the DPRK throughout my time as a communist. And what's interesting is the first thing that you hear about the DPRK in American media isn't necessarily that it's communist, just that it's a dictatorship. And perhaps that's because with the fading of the old style 20th century Cold War anti-communism, a lot more people these days are getting curious about communism. And so the media isn't so keen to denounce China and the DPRK on the basis that they're communist. They want to basically promote the idea that the DPRK is nothing more than a totalitarian, monarchical, feudal dictatorship. It's often compared to the fictional dictatorship from George Orwell's 1984, which was really BS when you get into what sorts of ideas it sought to convey. And none of that is connected to reality. The reality is that the DPRK is a socialist society that has been through severe hardships, not due to its own system, not so much due to its own policies, though I'm sure there's criticisms that could be made, but because the U.S. imperialists have waged economic war against it for a long time. And after the Soviet Union fell, it was quite difficult. And now it's trying to climb its way out of that. And no matter what happens, this has become quite clear throughout the last century, it's not going to budge. Its socialist system is not going to be dismantled, and it's only going to get stronger from what we can see.
Yes, you are correct about that. And I mean, there's a lot we could go over. That North Korea did have a huge amount of economic achievement in its first couple decades. They had astronomical amounts of electrification, raising people out of poverty, and they industrialized very rapidly, built hospitals, and that that I can quote BBC articles that talk about the North Korean economic miracle that happened in the aftermath of the Korean War, how they just very rapidly industrialized. And that's something that you'll never hear about. And the hardship in North Korea came after the fall of the Soviet Union because they needed petroleum, oil, to run their tractors. And their food system needed gasoline, and they couldn't have it. And so their food system came to a halt. And that was because of the petrodollar. And that was because the United States prevented, after the fall of the Soviet Union, the petrodollar reigned supreme. You could only buy oil in dollars. And because of that, they couldn't get any oil, and they had a food crisis. And the sanctions made it worse, and it was a bad time. And it was basically a man-made famine. And it was very similar to what the USA did to Iraq in the 90s and what they did to Cuba in the 90s, that the Soviet Union had fallen. And the USA basically picked out three countries that were, very solidly anti-imperialist, Iraq, North Korea, and Cuba, and just tried to just demolish them economically. And in North Korea, the result was, there was a famine where people were dying of malnutrition. And what's crazy is the government of North Korea didn't collapse. Any other government in the world would have collapsed under those circumstances. But the fact that North Korea was able to maintain its government shows that they really have the loyalty of the population. You can imagine that, if there was a food crisis in America, the government would fall in a couple weeks. You know what I mean? It would be over, right? People would be rioting in the streets. There'd be utter chaos. But in North Korea, despite a food crisis, that government was able to stay in power because they have won the loyalty of their population. Because prior to the fall of the Soviet Union, people saw their living standard rise so significantly. That's an important reality. And then the reason North Korea got nuclear weapons was, at the time that they were collapsing, they got worried. They said they might take this opportunity to invade us. So they started moving toward nuclear proliferation. So Bill Clinton made a deal with them that if you don't get nuclear weapons, we will give you peaceful nuclear energy. We will give you all this oil and all this food aid and all of this. And so North Korea said, okay, we'll take the deal. And then after a couple years, the U.S. Congress stopped funding the deal. And at that point, they're like, wait a second, we promised not to get nukes in exchange for this deal. What's happening? We're not getting the food aid we were promised. And then George W. Bush, after 9/11, gave the axis of evil speech, where he declared North Korea to be the axis of evil and started moving toward invading Iraq. And at that point, North Korea is like, okay, so we didn't get the food aid we were promised, And now we're on the invade list. We better get nuclear weapons. And so they got nuclear weapons. It's purely the fault of the United States. The United States, set up a situation where if North Korea didn't get nuclear weapons at that point, they'd be sitting ducks. They already agreed not to in exchange for certain things. And that version of events is never told, right? We never have that version of events. One of the wildest things is that I believe it was Madeleine Albright who negotiated the deal, the Secretary of State under Bill Clinton. And she met with Kim Jong-un or Kim Jong-il, his father. And she met with him and she said, I was blown away that he was actually an intelligent man. Like, what did she think? He's the leader of a country with tens of millions of people in it. Like, I mean, did she think he was an idiot? Yeah, she's like, oh, I was impressed. He was actually an intelligent man. Of course he was an intelligent man. I mean, he's running North Korea through a very hard time, mind you. I mean, it would take a very intelligent leader to run a country that's, had their major ally, the Soviet Union, fall and is facing like an all-out attack at the hands of the imperialists and holds the country together. Of course he's an intelligent man. I mean, and that's just the arrogance of the imperialists, right? It doesn't ever occur to them that one of their opponents might actually be an intelligent person, and that North Korea, I mean, you have to be impressed. They have launched a satellite into orbit at this point, right? I mean, could you imagine a country that's blockaded, locked out of the world economy, surrounded, and they've got their own satellites, they've got their own space program. Because of the sanctions, they have to make cell phones in-house. Did you know that? They can't import cell phone technology because of the sanctions. So they do it. They make their own cell phones in North Korea. North Korea, you want to talk about like the achievements of a socialist society. What they have achieved despite so much is really a testament to the strength of socialism. And it's the biggest untold story. Nobody ever talks about what they've achieved. We're just told that, a bunch of people starved to death in the 90s and that's communism. Everyone just starves. And it's like, that is not the whole story by any means.
Yes. And, when it comes to combating the propaganda against North Korea, look at the shift that has occurred within the last 10 years alone. 10 years ago, the film The Interview came out. This the Seth Rogen, James Franco comedy that was directly overseen by the CIA, and it presented the hugest lies against North Korea as flat fact. It got these CIA analysts in the film to say Kim Jong-un is starving his people, putting them in concentration camps, torturing them, and that was the basis for this absolutely BS satire that they spun, where their mission was to assassinate Kim Jong-un, and then that would make everything better. But now, Donald Trump has been pushed by the circumstances of the emerging multipolar world and the greater leverage that North Korea has gained. He's been pushed by those circumstances to go from, I will unleash fire and fury, to I would love to have diplomacy with Kim Jong-un. And now the bulk of the MAGA base is following with that change of thinking. And we know this because the majority of the American people in general liked that Trump had started diplomatic ties with North Korea when it happened. And clearly they're going to like it if that happens again.
Yeah, so there's a number of layers that we can talk about this with. But when we talk about a split between South Korea and America, we have to give some historical context. So, Rainer, I'm sure you know who this guy is, but I think a lot of our viewers don't. We don't know history of countries like Korea in the United States. So this is Park Chung-hee. What do you know about Park Chung-hee, Rainer?
Well, that he was the military dictator. He was one of the military dictators that I brought up earlier, who at first he seemed like the perfect puppet, but then he started to act more independent. Then he became viewed as outmoded.
Right. So Park Chung-hee, right, the first military dictator of South Korea was Syngman Rhee. And Syngman Rhee was not very effective. And there was, after the Korean War, the students of South Korea and the labor unions and others, they protested and they brought him down. And so the USA thought, okay, we need another military dictator to prop up, South Korea, to stabilize South Korea, to make sure we don't have a communist revolution. But we have to let this dictator do some economic development. We have to let him stabilize the economy, because if not, there's going to be chaos in the country. So they brought this guy to power, Park Chung-hee. right? Park Chung-hee was the military dictator, but they then forced Japan to loan a bunch of money to South Korea. And he set up a state-run steel industry, which was a huge government-controlled corporation, made lots of profits for private owners. It wasn't socialism, but it was like government-controlled capitalism, kind of like corporatism, like Mussolini kind of, right? It was Bonapartist military development of the economy. And by the way, all the big South Korean corporations are like that. The South Korean military and government built Samsung, built Hyundai. I mean, all of South Korea's industrialization happened with the oversight of the military and the government. Okay, so whenever I hear libertarians point to that map and be like, oh, look, if you think so, free markets are clearly the answer, look at South Korea versus North Korea. South Korea was built by the military. Okay. It's not an argument for the free market. It was the military and the state that built, South Korea's economy. Regardless, this guy, Park Chung-hee, he was building up South Korea's economy, and he was wildly popular. He built like a very prosperous urban middle class. Now, he was vicious. Many students were arrested and disappeared for getting involved in communist activism. He had a concentration camp for homeless children that he had. So this was not a good dude, but in order to stay in power, he had to stabilize the economy of South Korea, right? And so he built the state-run steel industry, and he started trying to get nuclear weapons during the 1970s. He wanted to have nuclear weapons. And if South Korea had nuclear weapons, there'd be no reason for U.S. troops to be in the country because they have nukes, and North Korea didn't have nuclear weapons at that point. They wouldn't be able to invade them. And so there was all this panic on the part of France, the French government in particular, but also the American government, that South Korea might get nuclear weapons. So South Korea reluctantly joined the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, but they violated it. They continued a nuclear weapons program and investigating how to get nukes up into the 80s. So South Korea was looking to get nuclear weapons. And Park Chung-hee was the military dictator of South Korea, and South Korea was increasingly more independent. So in the late 70s, the Carter administration started Koreagate. So we have Russiagate in our time. This was Koreagate. And they started investigating all kinds of American Korean businessmen as meddling in U.S. elections and giving bribes and money to Republicans. And all kinds of Republicans were dragged before congressional committees. U.S. media was saying, oh, there's this dangerous right-wing fascist authoritarian strongman dictator in South Korea, Park Chung-hee, and he's meddling in our American politics and all of that. And then in October of 1979, Park Chung-hee was having dinner at the presidential house with the head of the Korean CIA, the KCIA. That's like their intelligence agency. And the head of the KCIA was having dinner with President Park Chung-hee. And he shot President Park Chung-hee in the face and killed him. And then, was arrested by the other Korean CIA agents and summarily executed before he could ever give his testimony or motive about why he killed Park Chung-hee. So the leader of South Korea was killed at a time he was basically standing up to and defying the United States, killed by the head of his own intelligence agency. The whole thing is completely shady. You go and look this up. We have conspiracies and questions about the Kennedy assassination, but like this would be like, imagine Kennedy going out to dinner with John Foster Dulles, the head of the CIA, and him pulling out a gun and shooting Kennedy in the face. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's just like very blatant, right? So the head of the KCIA killed Park Chung-hee at a time the American government was investigating him like crazy for meddling in American politics and all of that. And that shows that there has always been, on the part of the American government, a feeling that South Korea doesn't really have the right to be an independent country. Even though they're happy to back them against North Korea, they don't like development on the Korean Peninsula. They certainly don't like independent trade. They don't want them to have their own nuclear weapons, their own economy. They want them as just kind of an outpost of the U.S. economy.
Yes, and it was bound to happen eventually. It was bound to happen that the South Korean government, after it transitioned towards a liberal so-called democracy and came to engage with this rising multipolar world with the rise of Eurasia, it was bound to happen that South Korea would again go in a direction which Washington didn't like. And we're going to see in these coming years how far the U.S. is going to go in countering South Korea. If they're going to assassinate somebody again, if they're going to try a color revolution. We have seen some scrutiny in the U.S. media recently over South Korea's democratic rights. No doubt that criticism is correct because this government has come out of a long tradition of South Korean authoritarianism, but the U.S. is exploiting that to try to do another switch out and replace the latest independent South Korean leader with somebody who would be willing to advance their war escalations.
All right, so let's continue. So again, the story continues. So Donald Trump was president of the United States. He tried to move toward peace on the Korean Peninsula. It was sabotaged by John Bolton and by Mike Pompeo. He leaves office January 6th, all of that. He's banned from social media. So September 11th, the first 9/11 after Donald Trump leaves office, in South Korea, there's a big event, a rally for Korean reunification that happens every year. And it's a religious rally that happens every year where they pray for the peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. It's put on by religious leaders in South Korea. Guess who speaks at it? Donald Trump.
I want to thank the Universal Peace Federation, and in particular, Dr. Hawk Jahan-moon, a tremendous person, for her incredible work on behalf of peace all over the world. Her story of escaping from North Korea at 5 years old, at the outset of the Korean War, is an amazing example of the power of faith in Almighty God. I also want to thank her late husband, Reverend Moon, for founding the Washington Times, an organization for which I have tremendous respect and admiration.
Now, what does it say underneath Donald Trump, right? That's Donald Trump. It says Think Tank 2022. So let's Google Think Tank 2022. What is Think Tank 2022? Think Tank 2022, right? It is the official website of Think Tank 2022. It is an organization. Let's find out how they describe themselves, right? Let's read their. It is a I see their event they're having, but if you go to their website, rallyofhope.org, Think Tank 2022, what is it? Well, I'm trying to read like what their description is, how they describe themselves. I see their World Summit, Rally of Hope Forum, but they're having Peace Summit 2023, May 3rd through 5th. But this is, what is it? It is a Korean. It is a shared. It is a forum for people to share their visions and policies for prosperity and reunification on the Korean Peninsula and world peace. They aim to create national unity and international cooperation to realize peace and unification on the Korean Peninsula and a world of permanent peace through new imagination. Various programs have been prepared to further materialize the peace charter containing this vision and practice. So that's what Think Tank 2022 is. Think Tank 2022 was started by Hawk Jahan-moon. Now, who is Hawk Jahan-moon? She is the widow of Reverend Sun Myung Moon. Now, who is Reverend Sun Myung Moon? Do you know who Reverend Sun Myung Moon is, Rainer?
Yeah, I've heard lots of bad things about him in the media over the years, but apparently there's another element to him, and there's a reason why he's gotten such a bad rap.
Well, it's one of these things that requires nuance. So this is Reverend Sun Myung Moon in 1994 at dinner with Kim Il-sung, right? So Reverend Sun Myung Moon was an anti-communist religious leader in South Korea and in the United States. He was in South Korea, but he moved to the United States in the early 70s. He was a big supporter of Richard Nixon, very anti-communist, a big supporter of Ronald Reagan, etc. And in the 1970s, he had a lot of young people that joined up with his movement. A lot of like young hippies joined it because it was kind of an Eastern religious mystical movement and such. They were just a political movement in the United States. And part of the Korea Gate investigations was going after Sun Myung Moon, right? They alleged that he was running a cult, that he was brainwashing people, that, that he was practicing mind control, blah, 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 all this stuff, right? And he was pretty widely demonized in American media. And that's kind of when the cult scare happened. 1978, you have Jonestown, which is the Jonestown mass suicide incident. And so then, there's a lot of fear of cults. And so Reverend Sun Myung Moon becomes kind of the target of this. He's supporting Ronald Reagan against Jimmy Carter. He's very anti-communist. I was in the Workers' World Party for years, and the Workers' World Party and the Unification Church used to get into fistfights with each other, right? They would have fistfights with each other. Workers' World Party was supported by North Korea, and it's pretty clear that, Reverend Moon was aligned with South Korea. But regardless, after the fall of the Soviet Union, falls, Reverend Sun Myung Moon says, look, I am a Korean and I want peace with North Korea. So he got on a plane and he went to North Korea to meet Kim Il-sung. And he forgave Kim Il-sung. Kim Il-sung had tortured him. He had originally lived in North Korea. He'd been arrested. Long story short, it was apparently other Christians who turned in Reverend Moon to the North Korean authorities because they thought his Christianity was not real Christianity. So it was other Christians that arranged his arrest. Regardless, Reverend Sun Myung Moon was arrested, and he says he was tortured and such in North Korea. So for him to go and hug Kim Il-sung and forgive Kim Il-sung was a really big moment. And starting in 1994, Reverend Sun Myung Moon started investing a lot of his money into North Korea. And he died in 2012. And at the time of his death, the North Koreans gave him the Reunification Medal, which is one of the highest medals that can be given. It's like a lifetime achievement medal as one of their closest and best friends. So you want to talk about a complete flip. This guy is running an anti-communist religious group, but after the fall of the Soviet Union, he says, look, he goes to North Korea and he starts investing in North Korea. He starts a car company. The state-run car company in North Korea is like a partnership with Reverend Sun Myung Moon's company. It's like I forget, it's something Motors. It's a Korean car company that they started. They are heavily invested in North Korea. And at the time that Reverend Sun Myung Moon dies in 2012, if you read the obituaries are all attacking Reverend Sun Myung Moon for cozying up to North Korea, accusing him of being a North Korean apologist, a friend of North Korea, which is completely the opposite, right? When he was, in the 70s and 80s, they saw him as nothing but an extreme anti-communist, but his views changed. So he died, and his widow, Hak Jahan Moon, she is now the leader of the movement that he started, the Unification Church. And she is the one who started Think Tank 2022, which is what Donald Trump was speaking at in that video. That's, Think Tank 2022 is the think tank that Donald Trump was speaking at in that video right after he left office. Is Think Tank 2022, and Donald Trump spoke at their event. And I got on the website of Think Tank 22, and I thought, okay, this is interesting. This is a think tank, and I started reading it. And some of the stuff, first of all, they had events in Zimbabwe, right? Think Tank 22 had a big conference in Zimbabwe, which is an anti-imperialist country. That's Robert Mugabe, and that was where they had one of their big gatherings. And I'm like, Zimbabwe is an anti-imperialist, country aligned with China, Robert Mugabe, ZANU, etc. That's interesting. And I started reading the speeches that were given at the Think Tank 2022 gatherings. One of the speeches was all about how German reunification must not be a model for Korean reunification, because German reunification was overthrowing socialism. And North Korea will never agree to any deal where they won't be able to keep their socialist system. And I thought, that sounds good to me. I would agree with that. And I read a number of articles that were really making very, very good points. I thought, well, that's interesting. So I'll tell you what I did, right? I will never forget 2022, August of 2022, CPI we were just hit with like some of the nastiest smears we've ever had. We were really widely attacked. And so we agreed we had to shut down temporarily until the dust cleared, right? And it was clear who was still with us, and people stopped talking about us in the media. So I thought, what am I going to do? I got, 3 months here. So I talked to some of my friends in Russia, and I talked to some of my friends in the Korean Friendship Association, and Caleb Maupin, showed up at Manhattan Family Church in New York City. And I showed up on Sunday morning, And I walked in my suit and tie, and I introduced myself to someone who's now my good friend, Reverend Milhan Stevens, and somebody else who's another good friend of mine, Reverend Joshua Holmes. And I said, hey, I'm Caleb. I'm an RT reporter. I run the Center for Political Innovation. I'm a communist, but I do believe in God. And you guys like North Korea, and so do I. Let's talk. What can we do? You know? And I walked in, and I'll tell you, they did not know what to make of me. They were terrified of me, to say the least. They were just like, you know, but I just kept going and showing up. And I said to them, hey, anything I can do to help you guys work for peace on the Korean Peninsula, I want to do. And so a few months later, in 2023, they got all the clergy of New York City that they are friends with together, and they had a rally at the United Nations for peace. It was around Ukraine. It was also around the Korean Peninsula, around Haiti. And so I called up my friends from the Rage Against the War Machine Coalition, and we had a rally of our own in Union Square, and then we marched up to the UN and we joined their rally. And this is the video.
With Russia, peace with China, peace with Russia, peace with China. It's time to stand for peace here at the United Nations. We are marching up to the religious rally. Russia and China are not our enemy. Peace with Russia, peace with China, 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 peace with Russia, peace with China.
So next up, we'd like to welcome up the founder of the Center for Political Innovation.
So yeah, it was a great day, you know. And what I also thought was neat was at that rally that they had at the UN, they had a speaker from the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, which has just been outlawed, actually, is now illegal in Ukraine. But they had a Ukrainian Orthodox priest speak about the persecution that the Ukrainian Orthodox Church has faced since the war, the conflict, the military operation in Ukraine has started. And so we were able to, you know, make a friendship with some people that are very committed to peace on the Korean Peninsula, don't agree with us on a lot, right? And that's fine. But we were able to make a friendship, and it was a great breakthrough. And I'll show you, I think I've got a copy of it here. I don't have a copy right here, but, you know, we printed a booklet called Journey of Hope, you know, about our efforts to promote peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. And, you know, there's an essay in that book by Pastor Milhan Stevens from the Unification Church. He wrote a very nice essay for us. And we continue to be on friendly terms with each other. We had a CPI workshop in Vermont in the spring, and a couple Unification Church members actually came to the workshop and were friendly. And then they flew me to Los Angeles a couple months ago. And that's that speech that you saw me give was in Los Angeles. And we had a joint CPI and CARP, which is their student organization, their campus organization. We had a joint CPI CARP event to promote peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula, where I gave the talk that you saw me giving earlier, right? And again, this is because we see an opening where we can actually do some good in the world to stop the march toward World War III, make friends in a place that we wouldn't normally make friends. You know, and this is an opening, and we see an opening and we're pursuing it. What do you think?
There's going to be another Korea Gate. Rather, the new Korea Gate has already started. They're building the foundations, like how they started building the foundations for Russiagate right after the 2016 Democratic Convention. Kamala Harris is accusing Trump of cozying up to so-called dictators, not even true of what North Korea is. And they're going to try to destroy any hopes for peace and reunification, especially in the coming months as this big danger, a second Trump administration, approaches. And they're going to try to rig the election for Harris. They're already rigging the polls, suppressing information that goes against what Harris wants to be talked about, suppressing your book, Caleb.
Mm-hmm.
And what we need to do is keep building up strength for the movement in favor of peace with Korea and with all the other places that the United States wants to start wars within.
Yeah. Now, I just want to throw this out there. We have one super chat, and we will answer super chats at the end. So, as we continue, if you have a super chat, I'm sure Rainer has plenty to say on that, and I do too. So please keep the super chats rolling in. It's a great way to support this channel and the work that we do. So, there continues to be more on this. I wanted to just show a clip from the event that we did out at LA Family Church, because it was really great. They flew me out to Los Angeles, and I spoke to this crowd of people from the Unification Church, also local CPI members, local peace activists. This was our event that we had. So we began by singing a song about the peaceful reunification. Yeah. So it was a great event. It was a great event. And it was, again, we found friends in an unlikely place. And that what I'm thinking about right now, Rainer, is with this election going on, what comes next? And I am telling you, I have a lot of different ideas. But one thing that I think needs to happen, right, and this is my opinion, and anyone who wants to help me with this, please speak up, because we're going to need help on this. If Donald Trump wins, which I really hope happens, right? I think he's the lesser of two evils. He's awful in a lot of ways, but he's not as bad as Kamala Harris. But if Donald Trump wins, I feel like what's going to happen is all the bad things about Trump are going to get amped up, right? All the pro-Israel stuff, the anti-immigrant stuff. If Trump wins, we need to get big posters of Donald Trump shaking hands with Kim Jong-un, and we need to get them everywhere. We need to be at Trump Tower on the night that he wins with a banner that's like 6 feet tall with Trump shaking hands with Kim, right? We need to be hanging banners like that over overpasses. We need to be everywhere that Trumpers are gathering to celebrate or whatever. We need to unfurl that banner and say, finish the job. Finish the job. What do you think?
Yes, in that scenario, we're going to need to nurture the anti-imperialist impulses of the MAGA base. And that really sounds like that's what you're alluding to.
Yes.
The idea of encouraging the people within Trump's base to embrace the pro-peace sides where they exist of what Trump has done in the past and what he may do in the future. And you talked about these three scenarios. One, Kamala Harris wins, worst case scenario, and then what you view as the most likely scenario where Trump wins and the bad parts of him get amped up. But then there's the scenario, the third scenario you talk about, where Trump wins, but he is compelled to do a lot of progressive things. And, in the event that he doesn't do those progressive things and he, for the most part, is a pro-imperialist president, I think that we need to nevertheless apply that pressure by reaching out to the parts of his coalition, like the libertarians, who will be upset if he does not govern as an anti-imperialist, as an anti-monopolist. So I think that there could actually be a middle ground between the second and third scenarios where there's lots of room for maneuvering the situation.
Donald Trump, if he wins, he's going to be on the defensive. And so if he's on the defensive, he can be pushed in different directions, right? And that's what we need to remember. Kamala Harris is just their product. She is completely plastic and manufactured, right? Whereas Donald Trump is coming in as somebody who's on the defensive. I mean, you know, somebody who has a big section of the establishment that's against him, is going to be fighting and trying to get things done. And that creates an opening for people like us to actually make a difference. And so if Donald Trump wins, we need to get that image of Trump and Kim shaking hands everywhere. I am in the process of trying to design a CPI t-shirt that has Trump and Kim shaking hands. On the back says, "Peace will make America great again." What do you think of that? Peace will make America great again.
Yeah, that's a pretty concise way to try to bring these people, these MAGA people, towards a more anti-imperialist position. And I think that it could also bring them towards a more pro-China position.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that this is strategic, and that, again, you know, the point is to actually change the world. And this is a moment where, you know, we're being strategic here, right? You know, is that, you know, that like there's a lot of bad things about Trump, but Trump wants to have a better policy toward North Korea. And so that gives us an opening to talk with Trump supporters about anti-imperialism, to talk to them about the truth about the North Koreans, to intervene and amplify the pro-DPRK, side of Trumpism. We have to be strategic here, right? And I'm excited. I want to change the world, right? You know, I love to hang out with people and talk theory and ideology and history, but you know, I think that there are some really good people in the Trump camp. There's a lot of bad people in the Trump camp. Sheldon Adelson, horrible. JD Vance, I don't trust him. He's slimy and manipulative and, you know, free market. And, you know, I mean, I don't trust JD Vance. And I will say this, and Rainer, I also, and I'll point this out, and we'll be clear, I think there are also people in the Trump camp who are doing good things for bad reasons or unclear reasons. Okay. Nick Fuentes is not a good person. Okay. There's no question about that. He's a racist. He's slimy. He's offensive. He's a white supremacist. He's bigoted. He's anti-Semitic. He's awful. But when Donald Trump was being interviewed by Elon Musk, Nick Fuentes made no war with Iran go viral. Good for him. I mean, somebody's got to do it. You know, I mean, is Brian Becker going to do it? Is the PSL going to do it? Are they going to make no war with Iran go viral? Of course not. So somebody's got to do it, right? Good for him. Candace Owens has said a lot of good things and a lot of weird, you know, conspiracy theories and stuff like that and anti-Semitism, but she's at least trying to push the Trump camp in the not World War III and not pro-Israel direction and not war with Iran direction. So we're living in strange times, but, you know, we have to kind of get past, I think that a lot of people that are in leftist or communist politics, they just want a virtue signal. Right? It's kind of like, I don't know. Did you ever play Little League Baseball, Rainer?
No, pretty detached from sports.
Oh, yeah. Well, in Little League Baseball, they always say it's not about whether you win or lose. It's just how you play the game. And that's not true in politics. In politics, it is about whether you win or lose. And it really doesn't matter how you play the game because the game is very corrupt and awful. And I think a lot of communists have it in their head. It's not, we can never win. We can never really change the world. So we just want a virtue signal. We want to show everyone that we're the most moral. We would never go, you know, march with MAGA people about North Korea because we hate MAGA, and we would never go, you know, and they're missing the point. The point is to actually change the world, right? That there's this imperialist system which is keeping countries in poverty, which is keeping the living standards of the world low, which is driving us toward World War III, which is leading toward a low-wage police state in our country. And our job is to rally the working people of the world against imperialism, to stand with the countries around the world that are striving for national liberation, and to get the working people of the United States to realize that their real enemy is at home, and that the people of the world, the colonized people of the world, are their true allies. I always quote Marx's beautiful letter about Ireland, where he said that, you know, that because oppressing Ireland is a central part of how the British bourgeoisie maintains its power, it is the duty of the International, the Working Men's Association, to promote the freedom and liberation of Ireland everywhere, not as a matter of abstract justice, but to get the workers of England to see that it is a question of furthering their own liberation, that the defeat of England and Ireland would be good for the English working class because it's the English bosses who would lose, and it would weaken their power, right? And that this is called revolutionary defeatism, right? You always support forces around the world that are struggling against your own imperialist bourgeoisie, right? You always do, no matter what, right? You welcome the defeat of your imperialist bourgeoisie because their interests are diametrically opposed to yours.
Yes, no, I've got a lot of thoughts in my head after that.
Go ahead.
You know, the reason why actors like Nick Fuentes and Candace Owens, anti-Semitic actors, can fill these spaces, a crucial reason is because those kinds of communists who virtue signal refuse to participate in these kinds of discourses. Of course, you're not going to see the virtue signaling left-tailist kinds of communists insert themselves into the conversation that Nick Fuentes inserted himself to. Because what are their what are the people that they depend on going to think of them? They're going to cancel them for supposedly being a MAGA communist or whatever. So that's what we need to do. We need to insert ourselves into these situations where if we don't do it, then people who promote the Jewish question are going to do it.
Right. Yeah, that's actually a really, really good point. And I see we have another super chat that's come in. So we'll start answering super chats here pretty soon. No question about it. But I just have a couple other points here that I think I'd like to go over with Rainer because this is really important. So another thing. So, I've been widely criticized for being part of that, peace rally that I showed you in New York City with the Unification Church, for speaking at this Unification Church event. I don't care, right? I've been called every dirty name in the world now. And, but one of the things that I want to point out is that there was another rally for peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula that took place a few months before that peace rally in New York City. And that rally was put on by an organization that used to be a very serious Korean American organization called Nodatol, that has really just deteriorated into being a front for the Party of Socialism and Liberation, right? It's a PSL front organization now. It used to be a very well-respected Korean American group that has a lot of roots. Now it's just a PSL front. But they were having a rally for peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. So I sent them an email on behalf of CPI, and I said, we'd like to come to your rally. And no response. And so I thought, okay, well, whatever. And then the day before the rally, they sent me a very nasty email saying that we should not come to their rally because we're, a cult and all kinds of, said really nasty things about us, right? Just personal attacks on me that they read on Twitter and stuff like that. And so I looked at that and I said, oh, okay. So, I'm being attacked for going to one rally on the Korean Peninsula, but I'm not allowed at the other one. So, I mean, you want me to go to the rally that I'm told I'm not supposed to go to, right? I mean, it's kind of bizarre. When the leftist groups don't want us, we gotta keep working for peace. We're not going to stop working for peace just because the leftists don't like us. But I also noticed that Nodatol, this is just classic. So last week, Kamala Harris gave her speech at the DNC. And she said that North Korea is supporting Trump. Nodatol put out an article. North Korea does not support Trump. And they have a quote from Kim Jong-un saying that whoever is the president of the United States, they're still opposed to U.S. imperialism. Like, what is wrong with them? I mean, what is wrong with them? I mean, it is true that obviously North Korea doesn't support Trump or any American president, right? They're at odds. They're still technically at war with the United States. Right. But they've clearly said that if Trump is reelected, peace talks can continue. Trump says he wants to continue the peace talks. Kamala Harris is attacking him for it. Like, if you want peace on the Korean Peninsula, Trump is obviously the more favorable candidate. So why the hell did they put that out there? No. North Korea doesn't support Trump. What do they think is going to happen? That, some pink-haired, nose-ringed, teenager who calls themselves a Trotskyite anarchist is going to go, oh, now I support North Korea. Whew, they don't support Trump. For a second there, I didn't support North Korea. You know what I'm saying? It's like, Like, what is wrong with them? North Korea, no, they don't support Trump, but Trump is obviously the better candidate for making peace with them. And why are they out there trying to deny that? What do you make of it?
Well, that's the role of what we call the left in today's United States. It's to police the discourse so that real progress doesn't happen, and so that what we call the communist movement remains something that tails the Democratic Party and stays in a particular space. And, I've spent much of the last year arguing against the BS that these types of political actors put out. It's necessary to continue arguing against that. But what I've come to be focusing on mainly at this stage in my life, in my development, in my political projects, is building something that can change the world, that can have a maximally positive impact. And that's why I'm paying such close attention to the divisions in the ruling class as they relate to foreign policy. And that's why I've come to pay so much attention to Korea, because the big point in Trump's favor is not that he's pro-Russia. We saw during Trump's term that he became a more anti-Russian president than Barack Obama. But what he did do, what that was positive, was open up diplomatic ties with Korea. And like I said, East Asia is the next big front that the imperialists want to pursue in their effort to expand this global conflict. So if we can hurt them when it comes to their war plans for Korea, then we're going to be able to do a lot of damage towards their broader schemes. We're going to stop their plan at a crucial point.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And CPI, that's what we're always trying to do, is how do we intervene? And I'm sure you know about our latest operation, which is we distributed 1,000 copies of each of these books, 2,000 books total at the Democrat convention, 1,000 copies of the Kamala Harris book, and 1,000 copies of Do You Believe in Growth? And we got them out there, and Jimmy Dore was photographed with one, and the Columbia College newspaper quoted Gabby Hernandez, who was handing out books, and quoted her about the books, and all kinds of copies were distributed. We really made a big splash at the Democratic National Convention among the protesters there. Many interviews, at least 20 different interviews were done with CPI members in Chicago during the convention. But I wanted to also point you toward this. So this map, I want people to see this, because a lot of people, geography is not the best subject of Americans. You and I, Rainer, we're knowledgeable, I'm sure, but geography is not the best subject of Americans, right? So this is a map of, you can see Alaska, you can see Russia, you can see China, Japan, and the Korean Peninsula. And I have said that the regions, on this map, they are the key to world peace. Because you remember Sarah Palin, she was governor of Alaska. She said, I can see Russia from my house. Russia and Alaska are very close. And Abraham Lincoln had the idea of building a bridge connecting Alaska to Russia, right? Abraham Lincoln called it the World Land Bridge, and he wasn't the only one. And the LaRouche people, the Schiller Institute, they also want to build a bridge connecting Alaska and Russia. And I also, the Unification Church, Reverend Sun Myung Moon, they have been calling for building a bridge connecting Alaska to Russia. And if you think about it, if Alaska and Russia got connected, if there was a bridge across the Bering Strait, that would lead to a huge amount of increase in trade between the United States and Russia, between the Korean Peninsula, China, and the United States and Canada. That would be a game changer in the global economy. That would nudge the world in the direction of peace. And that's why so many great people like Abraham Lincoln, like Lyndon LaRouche, like Reverend Sun Myung Moon have called for it, right? And Russia has been open to the idea for a long time. A Siberian land bridge, the World Land Bridge, the Bering Strait Bridge. There's a million different names for it. But the idea is to connect Alaska to Russia with a very large bridge so that suddenly trade between the United States and Canada and Russia is much easier, right? Across the Bering Sea. And that would lead to increased trade on the Korean Peninsula, increased trade with China. I think that there's something here that if the United States were to pivot away from being focused on trading with Western Europe and there was increased trade here, things could really, really change in the world. And, you know, again, these are little changes. These are not big dramatic things. This isn't some big revolution, but just one bridge connecting Russia to Alaska could really pivot things. What do you think?
You know, that's something when it comes to Trump and Russia that actually is a pretty good sign. Like if Trump wins and if he does pursue this industrial development in Alaska, yeah, that's a good prospect that I hadn't considered. And you know, in the long term, when socialism is built on this continent, that geographic reality that we're looking at right now, that is going to be a great way that we heal the divide between our two civilizations. And it's really a beautiful thing when you think about it.
Yeah, and I think, you know, petitioning and calling for the construction of the World Land Bridge, or whatever you want to call it, there's so many different names for it. The US Alaska or the US Russia connection highway, whatever you want to call it. Like if we could start popularizing that and explaining that it would result in all the economic development that's happening in China and in the Russian Far East. You know, Vladivostok, every year they have the Vladivostok Economic Forum in Russia, and like it's exploding. There's a huge amounts of economic growth happening in the Russian Far East and in China. And if North Korea, you know, ends up joining the world economy, if the sanctions are lifted, if they, you know, there's peace on the Korean Peninsula, like there's going to be an explosion of economic growth in this part of the world, and America could very easily be connected to it, right? And that is what we need to sell to people. There's a new economy in the world that is socialist and anti-imperialist, and we are getting locked out of it. Joe Biden's strategy is to just declare war on it, isolate it, put sanctions on it, etc. I think Donald Trump is just a self-interested guy who wants to make money. I don't think he has any ideology per se. But I think that businessmen like Donald Trump could be convinced that, hey, America is losing out. And if we build this bridge from Russia to Alaska, right, or from Alaska to Russia, we could be part of this new economy. America could make a lot more money, more jobs, more economic opportunity. And that's why I'm at the point where I don't think that drilling in the Arctic and Alaska is a bad thing, because any new economic activity in Alaska, anything that gets development or gets Alaska's economy going is a step toward building that Bering Strait Bridge. And so I'm at the point where I feel like we need to talk about Alaska as much as we can. We need to talk about the Bering Strait Bridge. We need to talk about peace on the Korean Peninsula. Like this is the puzzle piece that if this part of the world can start to heat up, right? I know it's very cold in Alaska, but if this part of the world can start to heat up, we can nudge the world toward world peace and towards the new rising anti-imperialist economy. So that's my last thought on this before we start answering questions. What are your last thoughts, Rainer?
Well, like I said, it's pretty incredible, this progress that you're pointing out could be made. And it's not something that I saw until you pointed it out. That's a really... I mean, when you think about the way that history develops, when you think about the serendipity of the kinds of things that we've been talking about, where political actors who are otherwise quite reactionary end up having an impact that makes progress more possible in the long term. And that, yeah, this is a historical step that monopoly finance capital just can't stop. Too many variables keep showing up. Very
good. Rainer, it's always fun to have you on here, but let's start answering questions. First question, I'll let you answer first. Your thoughts on Pavel Durov's arrest?
I'm gonna need to do some research into it. There have been a lot of people getting arrested lately. I'm gonna need to catch up on all of these political prisoners that the U.S. empire has been making. I'm gonna write an article on that soon, but yeah, I need to do more research into him.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what I think. Pavel Durov is the guy who invented Telegram, and he's in France, and the French government has arrested him. And it is the same bullshit that they used to jail Ross Ulbricht, the founder of Silk Road, the website. It's the same bullshit that they're now extraditing the guy from Mega Uploads, Kim.com, over, which is that people do illegal things on your platform, so you're responsible for them. Well, if that's the case, why is Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook not in jail? Because people do illegal things on Facebook all the time. People do illegal things on YouTube all the time. People do illegal things on Twitter all the time, right? But it only applies to people that are not part of the club, right? Telegram, actually, you know, they do suppress certain content in order to appease the United States and all of that, but they are not giving a backdoor to American intelligence like the other applications do. And so they've been suppressed. So I think this is a bullshit arrest. Elon Musk is opposing it. I'm glad to see that. The Russian government is opposing it and asking, you know, sticking up for Pavel. You know, even though I understand there has been tension between him and Russian government officials in the past, but they see this as coming from a bad place. I don't think this is a legitimate arrest. I think it's political. And it's about the fact that tech monopolies are fighting to maintain their control. I've used the analogy of the printing press. When the printing press was first invented, it was invented by the Catholic Church. I'm sorry, let me back that up. The printing press was actually invented on the Korean Peninsula. Eventually, it spread to China. And then Marco Polo took it to Europe. And in Europe, the Catholic Church started using it to print their Bibles and print their indulgences. And it was this new technology in Europe called the printing press, and they had control over it. But eventually, people who didn't agree with the Catholic Church got their hands on it and started printing the Bible in their own languages, started printing leaflets and newspapers. And the result was a social revolution, the overthrow of feudalism. Right? There was a huge, massive upheaval because this new technological development that spread information much more efficiently. Originally, it was in the hands of the old system, but eventually it got to the old system's opponents. And I think that the computer revolution is a similar story, right? Social media was invented by U.S. imperialism to serve their own purposes. But increasingly, other people around the world that oppose U.S. imperialism can use social media as well. And so they're scrambling to keep control over something they invented. But if you read what Marx wrote about technology and the tendency of the falling rate of profits, it's only a matter of time, right? If you're a capitalist corporation and you develop new technology, give it a year, give it 2 years, your competitors are going to have it. That's just how the market works, right? And in the world that we have today, the anti-imperialists are the competitors with imperialism. So it's only a matter of time before there already are alternatives to Facebook, alternatives to Twitter out there, and they're trying to suppress them. And they're trying to use the imperialist government to maintain the monopoly of you know, the outlets and platforms they control. And they're just trying to hold back the wheels of history. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. That's my opinion. So there we go. All right, next question. Russia mutual defense pact with the DPRK. Is that so? What do you say, Rainer?
Well, I feel like we went over a lot of this over the last hour and a half or so. This deal that has been made, or this pact that's been made over this last month or so, it's such an incredible development in the rise of Eurasia, in the transition to multipolarity, and it's one more reason for the imperialists to be scared. Because what they want to do is divide Russia from the socialist countries. They want to divide Russia from the DPRK. They want to divide Russia from China, and they're trying to use the virtue signaling leftist communism we were just talking about to do that, because they want to present the DPRK as a paragon of the American idea of what of what Marxism looks like, a paragon of American leftism, and which would mean that Russia is a cultural threat towards them. Basically, they say that North Korea and China are woke, which means that Russia is it's bad for them to have relations with Russia. But that's the opposite of what's actually happening. That's not attached to reality. Like these so-called red libs, they're pretty much as detached from reality as the people who say that North Korea is a 1984 dictatorship.
Right. Yeah. The idea, anyone who's ever been to any communist country, they are progressive. They are socialistic. Women are empowered, but they are not woke. They're not doing the destructive, woke, pessimistic degrowth stuff. That's just not what they're doing. You are absolutely right about that. And that, yeah, Russia and North Korea, they're both at odds with the imperialists. Why wouldn't they work together? And I continue to crack up. It is the height of arrogance from American officials, right? Venezuela and Iran, they start working together. And America's like, you can't do that. What do you mean? The USA has cut off Venezuela. USA has cut off Iran. So why can't they trade with each other? Right? Russia and China start working together. America, you can't do. Yeah, they can. Like, what is it your business? If you cut off a country, you sanction a country, you militarily threaten a country, and then they go find another country that you've done that to and start trading with them, what gives you the right to complain about it? Right? That would be like, you know, like, I mean, if you break up with your girlfriend and she starts dating somebody new, well, you broke up with her, you know, not your business. It's a weird thing about the United States, right? That they can kick around countries and then they still have the right to tell them who they are allowed to be friends with. The fact that Russia is friends with North Korea shouldn't be shocking to anybody at this point. The USA has tried to drive Russia out of the world economy. The USA has spent billions of dollars to prolong this ugly war in Ukraine. So, of course, Russia is going to seek friendship from other people that have been kicked around by the United States. Like, why is that a surprising thing? And why does the United States think they have any right to complain about it? Like, I find that to be ridiculous. So, all right, the last super chat, unless any more come in. And please, more super chats. We're here to answer your questions. If not, we can wrap this up. But the last super chat it's for you, Rainer, from Mariah. Mariah says, hey, Rainer, I am a Patreon. Please research the strange BlackRock stock trades that took place the day after or the day before the attempted Trump assassination. What do you think of that?
Holy shoot. This looks like another layer to this wild rabbit hole that's appeared over the last month or so. I mean, we already know quite a lot about the suspicious details surrounding the Trump assassinations. When you really pay attention to it, we know that this 20-year-old depressed man had encrypted online communications channels. We know that the FBI regularly persuades people who are mentally ill or disabled to agree to terrorist plots so that they can say that they foiled terrorist plots. But it looks like in this case, that they actually had the guy go through with the plot. But what is this? I barely was able to. I sort of forgotten what you're talking about. You're saying that BlackRock made a.
Here, I'll put it on the screen again. Hold up. She says, please research BlackRock stock trades that took place the day before the attempted Trump assassination.
Huh. Kind of reminds me of the theories that I've heard about 9/11 and how certain companies were acting like they already knew that it was going to happen. Yeah, these are the kinds of trends that you tend to see prior to big historical events like these, big catastrophic events. I will research that.
Very good. Well, Rainer, it is always a pleasure to have you on. I look forward to reading your articles. I get them in my inbox. Good stuff. Newswiththeory.com. I'm looking forward to your upcoming book. Glad that you are a member of CPI. And I'm glad also that you're going to help us with our effort to promote the Trump-Kim stuff, right? Because that's going to be really important. The point, as Mark said, the point, however, is to change it. The point is to change the world. And I think this is an opportunity for us to really score a blow for anti-imperialism. So thank you for all that you do. Thank you for your enthusiasm. Thank you for thinking about this deeply and taking this seriously and striving to promote anti-imperialism in every aspect of your life. My shout out to you and everyone in the Humboldt Socialist Union. You had a great rally out there for Venezuela recently, right? That was pretty good stuff, wasn't it?
Yeah.
For Venezuela?
We had a great time.
Yeah, it was really, really excellent. I'm really glad to see you all in the streets. I look forward to seeing your future work, and we'll be in touch. Talk to you soon. Yep.
Talk to you soon.
Yep.